As the Pittsburgh Steelers officially close the book on their off-season program and begin turning their full attention toward training camp, there is a growing sense of optimism surrounding the organization. For much of last off-season, uncertainty seemed to follow the franchise everywhere. Questions surrounded the quarterback position, concerns existed throughout the roster, and many analysts believed the Steelers were entering a transitional period that could leave them struggling to compete in one of the NFL's toughest divisions. Fast forward to today, and the outlook appears significantly different. The roster heading into training camp looks stronger, deeper, and more balanced than it did a year ago. The arrival of Aaron Rodgers brought stability to the quarterback position. Mike McCarthy has begun implementing his vision as head coach following the departure of Mike Tomlin. The wide receiver room, which was viewed as one of the biggest weaknesses on the roster just a season ago, has undergone a dramatic transformation through a combination of trades, draft selections, and player development. The offensive line appears more settled. The defensive front remains one of the strengths of the team. Even special teams have undergone changes designed to improve overall consistency. Yet despite all the progress Pittsburgh has made during the offseason, one reality remains true: Omar Khan is never finished building a roster. Since taking over as general manager, Khan has developed a reputation as one of the NFL's most aggressive and creative roster builders. He rarely allows complacency to set in, constantly searching for ways to improve the team even after major acquisitions have already been completed. Steelers fans have become accustomed to unexpected trades, surprise signings, and late summer roster additions that strengthen the team before the regular season begins. That is why many observers believe Pittsburgh could still have another move coming before Week 1. The biggest question, however, is where that move would occur. At first glance, several positions could be considered. Some fans continue to wonder whether the Steelers need another veteran wide receiver despite the improvements made to the position. Others point toward inside linebacker as an area that could benefit from additional depth. But when examining the roster more closely, one position stands out as a potentially overlooked concern: safety. While the Steelers have assembled what appears to be a strong starting secondary on paper, the depth behind those starters leaves room for concern. Injuries are inevitable during an NFL season, and Pittsburgh's margin for error at safety could be smaller than many realize. This concern was recently highlighted by Steelers beat writer Mike DeFabua, who discussed the situation in a mailbag for The Athletic. When evaluating what the defensive backroom might look like once final roster cuts occur, DeFabua suggested that Pittsburgh could ultimately look outside the organization for help at safety. That possibility may not seem urgent today, but it becomes increasingly interesting when examining the current makeup of the roster. At the top of the depth chart, the Steelers appear comfortable with their starters. Jalen Ramsey remains one of the most recognizable defensive backs in football, even if he is no longer performing at the elite level that once made him arguably the best cornerback in the league. His versatility, leadership, and experience provide enormous value to Pittsburgh's defense. Deshaun Elliott is expected to play a significant role as well, bringing physicality and toughness to the secondary. Meanwhile, Jaquan Brisker has quickly become one of the most exciting defensive players on the roster, with many inside and outside the organization believing he could emerge as one of the top safeties in the AFC. The concern begins when looking beyond those names. Elliott is returning from a significant hamstring injury, and while the expectation is that he will be ready to contribute, soft tissue injuries can sometimes linger longer than anticipated. Ramsey, despite remaining productive, is no longer in the prime of his career. The physical demands of the NFL become more challenging with age, and Pittsburgh must be prepared for the possibility that injuries or workload management could become factors throughout the season. That leaves the Steelers relying heavily on a group of relatively inexperienced depth players. Sebastian Castro is perhaps the most intriguing name among them. Entering the offseason, expectations surrounding Castro were relatively modest. As a former undrafted free agent, he was viewed primarily as a developmental player and special teams contributor. However, reports emerging from off-season workouts have been surprisingly positive. According to those reports, Castro received significant opportunities with the first-team defense during portions of the off-season program, particularly when Elliott was not fully participating in team drills. Coaches reportedly appreciated his football intelligence, effort, and overall development. While nobody is suggesting Castro is ready to become a full-time starter, the fact that he earned those opportunities speaks volumes about the progress he has made. The Steelers have a long history of uncovering contributors from unexpected places, and Castro may be attempting to follow that path. His value on special teams already gives him a foundation for making the roster, and continued growth at safety could make him an even more valuable asset. Many within the organization appear to view Castro as a player capable of filling a role similar to the one Miles Killebrew has occupied for years. Killebrew's impact extends far beyond traditional defensive snaps. His special teams' excellence, leadership, and reliability have made him one of the most respected role players on the roster. If Castro can develop into a similar type of contributor, Pittsburgh could have found another valuable piece without spending significant resources. Then there's Robert Spears Jennings, one of the newest members of the organization. Selected in the 7th round of the 2026 NFL Draft out of Oklahoma, Spears Jennings enters the league carrying all the uncertainty that accompanies late-round selections. While being drafted provides an advantage over undrafted players, 7th-round picks are far from guaranteed roster spots. Every year, numerous late-round selections fail to survive final roster cuts, particularly when competing at positions where established veterans already occupy key roles. Still, Spears Jennings has reportedly impressed coaches during off-season activities. His physicality, athleticism, and willingness to compete have stood out, creating optimism that he could eventually develop into a contributor. The challenge will be proving he is ready sooner rather than later. Training camp will likely determine his immediate future. If Spears Jennings performs well throughout camp and the preseason, Pittsburgh may feel comfortable keeping him on the active roster. However, if the coaching staff believes additional development is necessary, the practice squad could become the preferred destination. The same applies to Castro. This is where DeFabio's observation becomes particularly interesting. If the Steelers decide that neither Castro nor Spears Jennings is quite ready for a significant defensive role, the organization could pursue a veteran safety before the regular season begins. Such a move would not be unprecedented. In fact, Pittsburgh followed a similar strategy in 2025 when it signed Chuck Clark shortly before training camp. Rather than forcing young players into roles they were not prepared to handle, the organization chose to add an experienced veteran capable of providing immediate depth and stability. That approach could be repeated this year. Several intriguing veterans remain available, and more could become available as teams around the league begin making difficult salary cap decisions. Veterans are released every summer for financial reasons, roster reasons, or because younger players emerge unexpectedly. Savvy front offices monitor those situations closely, waiting for opportunities to strengthen weak areas of the roster. Names such as Taylor Rapp and Xavier Woods immediately stand out as potential possibilities. Both players possess significant NFL experience and could provide the type of depth Pittsburgh may be seeking. While neither would necessarily enter the building as a guaranteed starter, each would offer insurance behind the current starters and reduce the risk associated with injuries. Beyond the available free agents, there will almost certainly be surprise cuts around the league once training camps conclude. Every year, talented veterans become available unexpectedly as organizations prioritize younger players or attempt to manage financial commitments. The Steelers have frequently taken advantage of these situations in the past, and there is little reason to believe they will stop now. This entire discussion ultimately reflects one of Omar Khan's greatest strengths as a general manager, his willingness to remain proactive. Many teams view the offseason as largely complete once mandatory minicamps conclude. Pittsburgh does not operate that way. The Steelers consistently evaluate opportunities to improve, regardless of whether those opportunities arise in March, June, August, or even during the regular season itself. That mindset is particularly important this year. The AFC North remains one of the most competitive divisions in football. The Baltimore Ravens continue to field a championship-caliber roster. The Cincinnati Bengals remain dangerous whenever their offense is healthy. Every divisional game will carry enormous significance, and even small weaknesses can be exposed over the course of a 17-game season. If the Steelers are serious about competing for a playoff berth and potentially making a deep postseason run, they cannot afford to ignore potential vulnerabilities. Safety may not be the flashiest position on the roster, but it remains one of the most important. Modern NFL defenses rely heavily on versatile safeties who can cover, tackle, communicate, and adapt to constantly changing offensive schemes. Losing a starter without having reliable depth behind him can quickly become a major problem. That is why the coming weeks will be fascinating to watch. Sebastian Castro and Robert Spears-Jennings will have every opportunity to prove they belong. Training camp practices, preseason games, and special teams performances will all factor into the organization's decision-making process. If either player takes a major step forward, Pittsburgh may feel comfortable standing pat. If not, don't be surprised if Omar Khan once again goes shopping for veteran help. Because if the past few years have taught Steelers fans anything, it is that Khan is always searching for ways to improve the roster, and he is rarely afraid to make a move when he believes it can help the team win. As training camp approaches and the competition intensifies, safety may quietly become one of the most important position battles on the entire roster, and the outcome could determine whether the Steelers enter the 2026 season with complete confidence in their secondary or with lingering questions that still need answers. Thanks for watching and see you soon.